I love learning. I love learning so much, I might actually be in love with learning. But unlike many of you here today, I do not have a demonstrated history of working in the higher education industry. But I suspect the reason we're all here today is because we are united in our love of learning. So, we're going to be diving into some data research and some heavy pedagogy this morning. So I thought I would want to engage with you to start out this day, to kick this off, by engaging with learning in one of my favorite ways, which is through story. So, I would like each of us to think about learning as if it is a love story. As if we are all in a long-term, passionate love relationship with learning. Because on some level, I suspect we all are. So, to kick off what your personal narrative might be about learning, I would like to begin today by asking you 3 personal questions. One is, what made you fall in love with learning? Surely, you must have a story, or somebody inspired you when you were young. How did you fall in love with learning? And question 2, the road of learning is not often all love and roses. It's often paved with a lot of difficulty. How do you stay in love with learning when learning is difficult, when learning seems impossible? And question number 3, what can we do as educators to inspire others to love learning? I am not a jealous lover. I want to share learning with as many people as I possibly can. So those are my 3 questions for you this morning for you to reflect upon. And if you note, these 3 questions are the basis for your typical 3-act classic romance. In Act 1, we have the meat, the exposition. How do people meet? How did you come to love learning? And then in Act 2, we have the conflict. When things get tough, when there's misunderstandings, that's all part of Act 2. And then we have Act 3, which is there a happily ever after or isn't there? How do we resolve this? What's the ongoing love story with learning? So reflect on that, and I'm going to kick things off by telling you my personal 3-act love story. And please, while I do this, layer your own personal love story over it. You may find some similarities. You might find yourself saying, oh yeah, I can relate to that. And then there'll be other parts where you say, well, that's weird. No, I don't relate to that at all. And I think that's great because we all have similarities, but we all have differences. And let's start learning what those are so we can share these kind of stories and inspire others to learn through story as well. So I'm going to kick things off with my Act 1 of how I fell in love with learning. And my story begins in the south side of Chicago because that's where I was born. My father was also born on the south side of Chicago. He is the son of Lithuanian immigrants. And my mother was born just an hour up the road in Toronto, Ontario. And she is the daughter of Polish immigrants. Neither of my parents spoke English as their first language. They went to school to learn how to speak English. And then when I started speaking English in the south side of Chicago, I started talking with a south side Chicago accent. And my Canadian mother was not pleased. I'm her only daughter, and she said, oh no, this is really cute on your brother and on your father, but you're my only girl. Can you please sound more like me? And she tried every day to get me to speak with a Canadian accent. And I love Mom, and we were very close and talked to each other day, but she was not successful in giving me a Canadian accent. And you know what? In all fairness, she was fighting this huge culture that was surrounding her. She had no hope of really giving me a Canadian accent. But I have today what I call a group hug kind of accent. There might be a little Canada in there. There might be a little bit of Southside Chicago in there. But it's mostly a big old group hug of the Midwest, and as I've traveled, just about every other place that I've ever lived. So while Mom was not successful with giving me a Canadian accent, there was one learning technique that she deployed that I think was the germ of me falling in love with learning. And her technique was this. Every day as a family, we would get together as a dinner, my father, my brother, my mother, and I. And the first thing we would do was say grace. And then the second thing we did is we were all required to answer this one simple question. And the question was this: what did you learn today? Now think about this. Someone you love and you respect and you admire is asking you at the dinner table and insisting on really good manners of what you learned today. And at my mother's dinner table, you could not be a sullen child. You could not say, nothing. You had to be, at least show some enthusiasm or some interest in what you learned today. So every day, I would come to the table with something to learn. And I wasn't alone. So did my brother, so did my father, so did my mother. Storytelling is huge in the Eastern European tradition. And I think that learning technique is brilliant because look at all the sub-techniques that were contained in that one simple daily lesson. Number one, I started out every day with a sense of purpose. Go forth and learn something. Bring it home. Discuss it. Number two, it was short. I didn't have to take up the whole dinner. I might have a 15-second anecdote to share, maybe a bit of news or gossip, or maybe it was a lesson in school that I was very excited about. Number three, it was repetitive. It was habitual. Every single day, every single dinner, what did you learn today? And it had to be something new. Number four, it was social. We were all around together as a family, eating in a social space. To this very day, I consider eating and having meal with people a part of a social learning environment. And number five, it was competitive. I was the youngest. I thought my mother and my father and my brother were older and more interesting, and they were talking about things that I didn't know about, and I was the littlest, and I wanted to be in there and say something interesting too. So I wanted to make sure that I had something to say. And lastly, it was multi-sensory. There was sounds, there was smells, there was tastes, there was interaction. And I have no data to back this up, but I know that there's a lot of good research that's coming out that says the more senses that you can integrate as you're learning something, the more likely it is to have it stick in your head. No data to back that up whatsoever, but I think Mom's daily lesson of what did you learn today was instrumental in getting me to fall in love with learning. So now, we come to Act 2, the conflict. What do we do to stay in love with learning when learning gets tough? Because the road to true love is often laden with all sorts of mishaps, and the same thing happens with learning. Well, my Act 2 is this. As you might imagine, coming from a family that loved learning and loved storytelling, I did well in high school. And by that I mean I got good grades, I had friends, I had activities. So yay me, I get to go off to college, and I'm the first person in my family to be able to do that. And my parents are over the moon proud. I'm going away to college, their daughter, yay. I go to college, and what happens? I do well there too. Same deal, friends, good grades, the shot. So you're saying, hey, what's the conflict? You're doing well. The conflict is this: I go to college and I feel like a huge dope. Everybody there, it seemed to me, knew why they were there to go to college, and I had no idea. My idea was this. This is what I thought. I had no idea I was supposed to go to college to get a career. This is why I thought I went to college, and so did my parents. I didn't know I was supposed to go to college to get a career. I thought I was supposed to go to college to learn things. We seriously did not know, and you're saying you're a smart girl, how did you miss this? Well, I did. I did not know that I was supposed to go to college to get a career. I went there to learn things. So what do? This is what I do. I get to college and I don't even know what my major is going to be. I start taking everything. I'm like, that's an interesting class. I'm going to take that. And then 3 months later, I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a fascinating class. I'm going to major in that. I changed majors a lot. I don't want to tell you how many times I changed majors. I did manage to graduate in 4 years with 2 majors. So I got that going for me, right? But then I graduate and I have no idea what I'm supposed to be doing with my life. And all my friends went on, it seemed, to these great and glorious careers, and I have no sense of noble purpose or what I'm supposed to be doing with my life. I see from many of you that, oh yeah, I relate to that feeling. So, I go to see career counselors. I went to see 3 different career counselors. They made me take interest and aptitude tests. And you know what they told me? Gee, you're interested in a lot of things. Knew that. Gee, you're good at a lot of things. Oh, okay. You know what you should do? You should choose one of those things and then stick and settle with it. You don't want to be running around all your life. You should just pick something and stick with it. And I couldn't. That's why I went to the career counselors. I didn't know what to pick. I didn't know what to choose. I was hoping for some more specific direction other than just do what you want to do. Well, this is what I did. I ran from one thing to another. I started freelancing and doing all sorts of crazy temp jobs. I bagged rats in a nuclear power plant. I taught at a computer camp. I was an interior decorator. I did all sorts of temp jobs for maybe a year or 2 years. And then I get a part-time job at a university. And all this did was feed my learning junkie habit, because the biggest benefit of having a job at the university is tuition reimbursement. So now I'm working half-time at the university because benefits, and it's putting a roof over my head, and it's all great. And then I get my master's degree in my part-time because free tuition, right, how you pass that up, and I still have all this time on my hands, so I'm doing all these freelance jobs and temp jobs, and I still feel like I'm very, very conflicted, and I felt very bad at myself because, once again, I'm torn between 2 cultures. One culture, my family culture and my Eastern European culture, is telling me, you're an interesting person for doing all these interesting, varied things. Live for the moment. You go, girl, so to speak. And then the other side, corporate America college culture, is saying, okay, you've had enough fun. You don't want to be a professional student all your life. And you're running around all over the place. This is unseemly. And by the way, that term professional student, that's not meant kindly now, is it? I was also called a dilettante and a job hopper. None of these are meant very kindly. So I felt quite bad about myself and quite conflicted between those 2 overriding cultures. So now we come to Act 3, my resolutions in this story, and I hope that you're probably thinking at this point, well, she finally found out what it is that she wants to do with her life. She's found her noble purpose. You know, I'm a lynda.com author and a linkedin.com author. Surely I must have this, one noble purpose. And no, that's not what happened. I have no one noble career purpose. And remember, I started this whole talk by saying, I love learning. I've never been in love with a career. I love learning new things. Really love learning new things. And I'm not alone. I don't know if anyone's read this, but it's a fabulous book. It's called How to Be Everything, a guide for those who still don't know what they want to be when they grow up. It's by Emily Wapnick, and it's a 2017 book. But she calls people like me who hop from one thing to another, temp jobs, being interested in something, seems like I'm going to be devoting the rest of my life to it, but I don't, and I leave. She calls us something better than job hoppers and dilettantes and professional students. What she calls us is multi-potentialites. And in her book, Refuse to Choose, Barbara Scher refers to us as scanners. We scan the horizon and start picking off and seeing different opportunities and becoming involved in those kind of things. They didn't have this kind of career planning when I was growing up, and by George, I wish they did, because it was very difficult being told you're a loser for continuing to learn, as opposed to you go, girl, you continue to learn, and you continue to learn as fast as you can. So keep learning, and yet I heard two anecdotes last week that I think are absolutely fascinating. One is that in a few years, and I learned this from one of my LinkedIn learning producers, that 60% of all jobs are going to be either freelance or contract within a few years. And that by 2025, 70% of all jobs will be flex time. The workplace is obviously changing a lot. So keeping on learning, it seems like that wacky skill that I have of going from one thing to another and really loving learning is not such a bad thing after all, and might be a very valuable thing to give and to inspire students with. So I do want to close with just a few more stories, and one is, I'd like to start by saying something very provocative, which is, for me, and this is just my personal opinion and no data once again, there are no new ways to learn. There are only the old ways. And that might seem really weird since I am a LinkedIn learning author and a Lynda author, and I do these online things. But let me tell you my little story about why I think there's only the old ways to learn. Among all the other crazy things that I do to earn money for a living and because I'm passionate about them, I work for an educational toy company. It's called Uncle Goose Toys. And what do? They make wooden blocks. They are the only company in America, as a matter of fact, that still hand manufactures wood blocks with all American-made materials. Now you might be thinking, wood blocks is a toy? In the era of smartphones and toys that go bleep and blorp and won't stop playing Frozen and are just so obnoxious, do these silent, quiet, little wood blocks have any future whatsoever? Well, I'm biased, of course, but I say yes, I do. Because when you think about it, the blocks are fundamental. They're very old-fashioned, but they're a fundamental tool in how we start describing things. They're often used as a concrete metaphor for a lot of abstract principles. Blockchain, anyone? Right? Or if we're creating a PowerPoint presentation, we'll often say, why, that's the building blocks of, and put them together. And really, the way I learned, you can take a block and you can learn so much from one block. We've got capital letters and colors and words and numbers, all sorts of information on one block. But we don't have just one block. We have a whole set, so we can add more. We can start sorting and stacking and building structures and deconstructing. And as a matter of fact, when I create a lynda.com course, I'll take a big topic like public speaking or crisis communication and break it down and deconstruct it into several videos so that you can learn from one block or one video, or combine it together for a course, or take some more courses and stack them together so that you have a learning path. So that is part of my strategy of bit by bit, block by block, we start building learning. Kind of like, what did you learn today, every day at the dinner table? So I would like to say there are no new ways to learn. There are only the old ways. And yet, I still get pushback. I have a colleague at the university where I taught who was rather put out with me for being a lynda.com author. He said, and I'm sure maybe you've heard this before, why would anybody go to college if all they have to do is take an online course? And I understand the fear behind that sort of statement, but understand where I'm coming from, my dual citizenship, my double major kind of personality. Classroom learning versus online learning, it's not an either-or situation, it's a both-and situation. Let's embrace these new tools, which is why I like to say there are no new ways to learn, there are only the old ways to learn. We just have new tools. And I am very excited to be here today to learn how you are using these new tools in your classrooms and how you are embracing them. And maybe you do have new ways to learn, in which case I would love it if you could teach me what they are. One last anecdote. A few months ago, a bunch of us middle-aged colleagues got together and we were in a conference room. and we decided to take the lynda.com blockchain basics course. All right, once again, blocks, gotta love them. And we did it because we needed to have this shared vocabulary. A lot of times we'll talk about these new tech concepts and there's misunderstanding. It's like telephone. This person's talking about one thing and we don't know what they're talking about, so we kind of pretend that we do and the conversation gets muddled. So we all met together in a conference room over pizza and took the blockchain basics class and discussed it. We did the quizzes, we had a pizza, we chatted about it. It was an hour. We developed a common understanding and a common vocabulary. And I had to smile because it's really no different than what we did at my family dinner table. What did you learn today? And once again, it's this social experience. We're having a pizza. One bit at a time, one block at a time, one day at a time, you learn and you build and you grow. So that was my personal learning love story. I would like you to reflect on those 3 questions as we go throughout the day. What made you fall in love with learning? What makes you stick with learning when learning becomes difficult? And lastly, what are we gonna do to inspire everyone that we come into contact to love learning as much as we do, if not more? A great day of learning lies before us. I look forward to hearing your learning love story throughout the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. That was great. While we are switching over, we are going to have our user panel next. So if you need to, feel free to stand up, stretch your legs, get the blood flowing a little bit. And we